Live from the Washington, D.C. area, it's the Inside Scoop, Emerald Planet. All the ecology news that our viewers want to know. Now, here's your host, Executive Director of the Emerald Planet, Dr. Sam Lee Hancock.
Hello and welcome to the Emerald Planet as we come to you from Washington, D.C. in the United States as we look around the globe in 144 different nations looking for those 1,000 best practices, the technologies and the services and the products that we need as we move through the 21st century. And we're also, of course, looking at the people that are making a difference in all these various countries and looking into how we're going to accommodate a planet with 9 billion people. Yes, we're going to be adding about 2 billion by 2050. And so how do we provide the infrastructure, the food, the fuel, the fiber, and everything that's needed not only to just allow people to exist, but actually to enhance and thrive in a new planet. And we have someone that's sitting right next to me that's been working on this for a number of years, looking at how we actually move the planet to where we're involving all people. And of course, many of these come through what we call communities of faith. So Beth Norcross is the interim director, and she's co-founder of the Green Seminary Initiative, and also an adjunct professor and Eco-Theology program at Wesley Theological Seminary in Washington, D.C. And Beth, welcome to the Emerald Planet.
Well, thank you. It's a pleasure to be here.
And I know you've been at this for a long time, but this initiative, as far as the Green Seminary is concerned, what does that mean? And then we'll talk about some of the impact and how you're involving people, various people, from the different communities of faith.
Well, thank you first for allowing me to come on. What a great privilege and pleasure.
We're pleased to have you.
The Green Seminary Initiative actually is a very interesting program. You know, there's lots going on in the congregational level now. You'll hear from some of those later on. But what we were finding is that the pastors were not receiving the training in theological school to meet those efforts that were happening at the churches and the synagogues and so forth. This is
almost like physicians not getting educated about nutrition and proper exercise and all these other kinds of things. So you're really leading them the next step.
Well, that's right. And what we're trying to do is give these religious leaders of the future both the theological skills and the practical skills to take into their congregations of faith so that they can provide the leadership that we need at the faith level to confront the rather daunting ecological challenges that we have before us.
Yeah, and the reason that we're saying that as far as communities of faith, Beth, as you know, that in many communities, the dominant leadership really does come out of the faith community regardless of what their religion is. So it's very important to engage them and for them to be aware and sensitize their people. So I'm guessing through your Green Seminary initiative, that's what you're doing, this sensitizing people, but at the same time, we're trying to generate action.
Well, absolutely, and you hit the nail on the head. We're trying to do both those things. We have programs in academics, worship, community life, and building and grounds, of course, and also public advocacy. And what we're trying to do is get these skills into the hands of the people who are leading these congregations. But probably more importantly, we're trying to integrate creation and the care of creation into the working theologies of these pastors to be, because it's within that theology, that theological shift, that we have to make if we're really going to make systemic change.
Now, looking at that, how are you engaging the pastors, the ministers, the imams, the priests, whatever they're called, the leadership within these communities of faith, so that they then in turn, theologically are putting that thread out there to their congregations, again, whatever that may be, and then have this constant loop where you're feeding back to the leadership, back to the congregation, back to the leadership, so they really are moving forward, with a unified approach, if you will.
Absolutely, and it is a loop. It's a theology practice back to theology and practice. And I think what we're trying to do at the seminary level then is to do a couple of things. First of all, we need to impress upon these students the ecological imperative. What's at stake not only for the planet, but for those who are absolutely the most vulnerable, who are already suffering first. First and foremost, the ecological imperative. And then what's the theological imperative? From our Christian faith, what does the Bible say? There's a rich tradition within biblical literature about not only protecting the earth, but also engaging with it and finding God there. So the ecological imperative and the theological imperative. And then after that, what are the practical skills? What are the things that these pastors are going to need to know about changing the behavior of their congregations within their structures and then outside in their own homes?
Now, looking at the churches, I mean, there's simple things that people can do, and people say that they're not so impressed. People, change their light bulbs and they start doing recycling and all that. Yeah, that's really a manifestation as a first step of understanding or at least caring for the environment. So in this continuous loop, how do we allow the congregations then to come back and impact on the leadership within the church? So again, they're all moving forward to do this kind of work in tandem, within a framework of faith.
Well, we start wherever you can on that loop, Sam. We start with the theology, if that's where the soft spot is. We start with the practice, if that's where the soft spot is. We let the practice drive the theology drive the practice. And we are in many, many churches and synagogues and mosques around the world now. And it's really exciting, and it gives me a great deal of hope to see these efforts, these small efforts, when combined, become something large and systemic. And I really do have hope that we're going to crack this nut, but only collectively, only together.
Well, the whole thing about it is collaboration, because without collaboration, in a sense, nothing happens as we're moving through the 21st century. We can't all stand alone. You can't have one community of faith standing either against or standing by itself.
Right.
We all need to collaborate. It's just like world peace. I mean, this is really the extension of that. But if you look at, the Christian faith, the Buddhist faith, the many of the others, this focus on the being, whether it's human, animal, plant, again, we have to respect all living things. And so looking at the seminaries, how do we embed this so that there's this profound respect for all living things, so we stop wars, we stop the rumors of wars, we stop the destruction of the environment? I mean, all this really goes hand in hand.
Well, absolutely. I mean, it's all related. And the way we start at the seminary level, I believe, and we believe, is with the academics, is getting inside the theology, the very way that we see God and that we think about neighbor as being not only someone who is sitting next to us, not only your human neighbor, but your non-human neighbor as well. And in particularly within our Christian tradition, those neighbors whom Jesus called out for special significance, special attention, those who live at the margins, those who are poor and in particular need of help. That's where we start in the seminaries and in the churches, I think, as well.
Looking at the courses you're doing at the Wesley Seminary, we're really looking at a globe with about 1 billion people without adequate water. We have almost 3.5 billion people without literally any kind of proper sanitation, which leads back into this negative loop of, all the diseases that we have and all that. So through the seminaries, how do we impart these very practical things? Yes, we talk about the theology, we talk about, God as a supernatural existence out there, whatever we call or whatever image that has, or no image. But at the same time, we need to be, in essence, the hands and feet of God.
Yes.
How do we do that hands and feet of God through this kind of faith community environment?
Well, certainly in the seminary, we have the best of both worlds in that we have the theology, and I still think it's really important to get into that. But we have these laboratories, because the seminaries themselves, I know at Wesley Seminary, we just put up a LEED certified dorm. That sends a message. It not only sends a message, but it gives a practical idea to the students who are living there that our faith means something in the world, that this just isn't air, that we're talking. This is real nuts and bolts on the ground. I too can take that experience of being in a LEED certified dorm and go into my church and build LEED certified buildings. Similarly, how I dispose of my trash, how I feed the seminary, completely exemplifies how I could do that in my church as well. So it really does become a testing ground and a proving ground so that these students are exposed not only to the theology of creation care, but the practice of
So what you're doing
care.
then, it's a non-threatening environment, Beth, as far as these seminarians are concerned, but at the same time I understand they have people where they have the internships or they have some kind of summer outreach type programs where they can actually go into the community. So they're getting the theory, if you will, but then they have to go and practice that theory. So going back to the ones that are studying in the seminary, how do they actually then feed back to the faculty saying, you know, what I had in this last semester or my first 2 or 3 years, I needed to have this. Again, what is that feedback so that we're constantly improving, enhancing, and refining the theology they're learning on campus, and then translate that to real world?
Well, it's a very, very interesting question. I know at Wesley and certainly other seminaries around the country, students are required to do a practice in mission and ministry. And there is active conversation between the students and the faculty and the staff as to what's happening in the church. These practices in ministry are the eyes and ears of the students of the seminary.
Hands and feet.
Yes. And they come back and they say, I need to know this and I need to learn this. And in fact, the younger students are coming in now with a great deal of interest in ecological issues and in issues related to social justice. Mm-hmm. And so they're clamoring for more courses.
Well, I think it's absolutely fantastic. Of course, tying information technology with all of that and the software and the hardware. But we have about 45 seconds left, 40 seconds. It just went on. What do you see for the Green Seminary Initiative over the next 5, 10, 15 years? Well,
we're beginning, I believe, to get to that tipping point. We have now 50 some odd seminaries involved in one way or the other. Again, their students are asking for this information. They know they need this, and they know they need to have the skills in their own congregations. These new pastors that we're training now are going to be pastors for 40 and 50 years. They need to know this stuff.
Yeah, they're going to be around 2050 when all this, we're really getting to the tipping point. Yeah. Beth Norcross, Interim Director and co-founder of the Green Seminary Initiative. Thank you for being with us on the Emerald Planet.
My pleasure.
And thank you for being with us as we look around the globe to create the Emerald Planet.
Some dreams are universal. Dreams that inspire us. Multiple sclerosis is a devastating disease that changes lives forever. The National MS Society does more for people with MS than any organization in the world. But we can't do it alone. To get involved, visit us online at nationalmssociety.org. or call 1-800-FIGHT-MS. This is why we're here. Because nobody dreams of having multiple sclerosis.
What's wrong with this picture? Half of young Americans can't locate economic powers like Japan and India. 20% can't even find the Pacific Ocean. Without geography, our children aren't ready for the world. Geography is everywhere. It's incredible creatures, rhythm, fashion, flavor. It's economics and politics. It's change. Understanding connections between people and places is critical in the 21st century. That's why we created mywonderfulworld.org. Go there now for your free parent and teacher action kits and give our kids the power of global knowledge. Because kids who understand our world today can succeed in it tomorrow.
We're back to the Inside Scoop Emerald Planet. Here again, your host, Dr. Sam.
Hello and welcome to the Emerald Planet as we come to you from Washington, D.C. in the United States as we're looking for those 1,000 best practices. The technologies, services, products, and of course the people are making a difference as we move through the 21st century. And we're looking towards 2050, even though we feel like that's a long time from now. In many cases, it's really almost the proverbial right around the corner because there's so much happening to society around the globe as far as all the various activities. We're going to be adding 2 billion new people, and at the same time, 2050 is kind of that tipping point as far as where we're going to be as a planet itself in relation to the environment and critical climate change. And so we have someone that's really addressing this particular issue from within the faith community, and this is one of those communities and aspects of society it's so wonderfully important to have involved on a day-to-day basis. This is Dr. Roger Helm, who is a member of the Faith Alliance for Climate Solutions. I like that title you have there. And it's the Unitarian Universalist congregation of Fairfax in Virginia in the United States. So, Roger, welcome.
Thank you very much, Sam. Glad to be here.
Glad to have you on the Emerald Planet. Tell us, what is this Faith Alliance for Climate Solutions?
It's something that grew out of our Unitarian Universalist congregation. There are several of us that have been engaged in climate change and been concerned about this issue, and we realized that we really needed to organize ourselves better, organize the congregation, and reach out to other congregations, because we recognize that the climate change issue is a moral, ethical, social justice issue that is going to impact so many people in the world, and we really have to come up with social, political, and technological solutions. It's not going to be simple. We have to take action now, and this is what we've really started to do. And so the whole idea is to try to find common sense solutions. That climate change is clearly a difficult thing. It's going to affect the most vulnerable human populations, the most vulnerable natural communities, and that's what we're really trying to do. And we think in the Washington, D.C., Northern Virginia area, because of the financial wherewithal of the people, the political acumen, and there's so many talented people here. This is the area we want to help.
Well, this is one of the highest per capita income, in the United States, which means in many cases much part of the world, but also yes, the greatest concentration of engineers, PhDs, all advanced degrees and all those other kinds of things. But you're talking about within the faith community of practical applications, practical steps using technology. Absolutely. And it's interesting, the counterbalance of this, of course, is theology, the ethereal, the ever-presence of a supernatural being, and yet you're talking about, practical things and getting things done. So how do you balance that within, this climate solutions environment?
I'm not sure if I can articulate this as nicely as I would like, but I'll try. I view faith as a process in which you have trust in something that's beyond what you can understand, beyond what you can do with your senses. And that's a very important thing to connect to. And there are very practical things that are going on that we have to do that do affect our senses and do affect our life. And I think if we can connect our connection to something that we don't quite grasp, that does have impact on our life, and help that part of our energy, of our community, of people that believe in that to the core of their soul, to engage in these activities and look for solutions that are solutions that we're going to have to come up with. Mm-hmm. And that's really what the faith community really needs to do.
Well, looking at just the name of your church, this Unitarian Universalist congregation, I mean, this really goes to where you're trying to reach out and bring a great body of people, in a sense, regardless of their faith, origin or their current faith or lack of faith, but yet people of goodwill that want to do something good for the planet, for the environment.
Yes.
So how do you reach into society and encourage people to do these practical things, to use the technology so that we actually are improving the planet instead of continuing a slow degradation of the resources and the planet that has been bequeathed by past generations?
Right, and it's our view to the future is why we're doing this. The past is the past, but we have a view to our children and future generations. And there's a reality among UUs that they're not big on dogma in any stretch of the imagination. And so when we actually introduced this climate change ideas, there was met with not little amount of skepticism, even though there was some very intelligent, engaged people that knew quite a bit about this issue. And we spent a lot of time talking to people, educating them, so that the UUs of our congregation in Fairfax and UUs generally are people that are very sincere, have a deep level of compassion. And once they realize that there is something that is very morally, ethically important to address, they engage. And they engage with their heart, they engage with their mind, and they engage with great energy. And that's what we're trying to connect to and get that to all the UUs and other faiths.
Well, looking at your own home church, and I think you were just addressing this, Roger, but this whole thing about this climate change resolution, what is in this resolution and why is that important? Because I understand this really, in a sense, is monumental as far as your faith community is concerned, but maybe other faith communities.
Yes, we really hope that other faith communities will look at the model that we have and be able to expand that and vote on something like this. This is a process in our congregation. We've been together for nearly 60 years, and we've only passed 4 congregational resolutions. I always say congressional, that's always wrong. Congregational resolutions. And so this is the 4th of those resolutions, and it was a year-long process of educating our members of our congregation about what the issue is with climate change, dealing with the skepticism, dealing with the concern, dealing with the overwhelming nature of this problem. People want to run away because it's such a big problem. And so we spent a year educating them and continually rewriting the draft of our resolution. And in November, the board had us have a special meeting to address this resolution and to vote on it. And after quite a bit more debate at that meeting, we had the vote, and it passed 123 to 1. And
that's incredible.
Yeah, for our group, for that much consensus, we were really pleased. And now we're trying to reach out to other congregations and sharing it with them. The basis of the resolution is to say that the congregation and the congregants, all of us, have actions we need to take. That there's a moral, ethical issue, that it's going to affect, UUs don't have a dogma per se, but we have 7 guiding principles that guide how we view the world. And we realize that global climate change is going to affect very deeply at least 3 or 4 of those issues. Our interdependent life, how we're part of the interdependent web of life. The fact that it's going to impact socially and economically disadvantaged communities greatly, and the inherent worth and dignity of people. So these are the kinds of things, when we shared it with our congregants, they got it, and we're now trying to share it further.
Well, looking at this, so you have the resolution. It took a year. It was almost unanimous consent to all that. So what practical steps has your congregation go through that may be some good examples for congregations here, but all over the globe?
I think there's a lot of things. You certainly, as individuals, we are agreeing to take personal steps in how we conduct ourselves and our carbon footprint. We're taking the same thing relative to our congregation and our grounds in terms of energy efficiency, how we're travel, the ways that we travel. We're committing to make distinct and thoughtful presentations to our county commissioners, our county supervisors, getting the county to reduce, for instance, the energy usage by 25% in their buildings in the next 3 years, getting them to put meters on buildings, that they actually publish it so that people are aware of it. We have it so every year our Social Justice Council reports on what we're doing, how we're doing, both as individuals as a congregation. So it's really trying to take real concrete steps that we can demonstrate what we're doing.
Yeah. Looking at all this, Roger, as far as these practical steps, and of course having a philosophical, a theological framework to have all this, what would you suggest to congregations, regardless of, the faith that they're coming from? How should they go about this so that more and more people become aware, but not only become aware, but actually do something?
Yeah, and I think that's
what's the next steps that we want to look at?
That's the key issue, Sam, that we really talked a lot about when we were working on this, is that we did not want it to be, oh, that's nice, another resolution, okay, good, we'll put that on the shelf and everything will be fine. No, this was about action. And we, every single day when we have our meeting, every single week when we have our meetings, we talk about, okay, what did we learn today? What can we share with others? How can we get that going? What are you doing? And so what I would say for other congregations, if you believe in the inherent worth and dignity of people, if you believe that you have a moral responsibility to make this world that we live in the best it can be, then take action. We don't have any great solutions yet. We're looking for solutions.
Again, the hands and feet of God is in all of this.
Yes, sir.
And then also have good ideas and have a heart that's attuned to what's going on around us. We only have about a minute left, so in that minute, what do you see, Roger, for the next 5, 10, 15 years as we head towards 2050, how communities of faith, regardless of where they're located, how they need to become involved and engaged?
I really hope and pray, quite honestly, that religious leaders across the world remember their basic teachings. Remember that they have a responsibility to everyone in their congregation and outside. And climate change is going to have huge impacts on people that have the least opportunity to prevent it. And we need to band together. We need to work together to find these solutions. And religious leaders have that opportunity to take their congregation and lead them. And I just reach out to them, and we're going to be reaching out to them, and Interfaith Power and Light through us, it's going to be great.
I think it's absolutely fantastic. Dr. Roger Helm, who is a member of the Faith Alliance for Climate Solutions of the Unitarian Universalist Congregation of Fairfax, Virginia in the United States. Thank you for being with us and sharing how communities of faith around the globe can be involved and engaged as we reach out to create the Emerald Planet.
Thank you so
I
much.
need a job.
Necesito trabajo.
I would like to speak English better.
Me gustaría hablar inglés mejor.
I want to be a U.S. citizen.
Quisiera ser ciudadano de los Estados Unidos.
For over 35 years,
Por más de 35 años,
the Hispanic Committee of Virginia has been serving our community.
el Comité Hispano de Virginia ha estado sirviendo a nuestra comunidad.
Job training and placement,
Capacitación, ayuda para conseguir trabajo,
education for children and adults,
educación para niños y adultos,
immigration, naturalization, and medical referrals.
ayuda para los procesos de inmigración y naturalización y orientación sobre médicos
Are a small part of what we do.
son solo una pequeña parte de lo que hacemos.
For help, information, or to volunteer,
Para ayuda, información o para ofrecerse como voluntario,
contact the Hispanic Committee of Virginia,
comuníquese con el Comité Hispano de Virginia,
helping everyone participate more fully in American society.
ayudando a todos a participar plenamente en la sociedad norteamericana.
Hey Lena, where's yours?
Would you notice if you were missing half your kidney function? According to the National Kidney Foundation, 20 million people have chronic kidney disease, and 20 million more may be at risk and not even know it. Anyone with high blood pressure, diabetes, or family history of chronic kidney disease is at risk. Early diagnosis is vitally important. To get the whole story, talk to your doctor and visit the National Kidney Foundation at kidney.org or call for a free brochure. Because when it comes to chronic kidney disease, you might not know the half.
Well, hello and welcome to the Emerald Planet. I'm Dr. Sam Hancock, the President and Executive Director of the Emerald Planet and also the Director and host of Emerald Planet TV. We're coming to you from Washington, D.C., which is the capital of the United States, as you're well aware, and we're looking at 144 different nations, looking for those 1,000 best practices, the technologies, the services, and the products that are making a difference as we move towards 2050. And the reason we're doing that is 2050 seems to be that tipping point as far as the future of the entire planet itself. And by then, we'll have grown from 7 billion plus to 9, maybe over 9 billion people. So how are we going to take care of all these folks? The food, the fuel, the fiber, but we want to have a life for all these people that actually allows them to thrive and not just survive. And I have someone sitting right beside me that is very much engaged in all this activity for the community of faith. And Joelle Novey, who is the Director of Interfaith Power and Light in Maryland and Washington, D.C. area. And I must say that includes Washington, D.C., the capital city, as well as Northern Virginia. But welcome, Joelle.
Thank you. It's
Glad to have you here with us. Looking at what you're doing as director, I know this is a very dynamic community. As I told you, I've only been trying to meet you for about 4 years now, as I've met people that are very much involved in this Interfaith Power and Light. What is Interfaith Power and Light?
Well, here in the DC area, Northern Virginia, and the state of Maryland, our local Interfaith Power and Light is working with several hundred congregations of all faith traditions to support them in saving energy, going green, and responding to climate change. And we're doing this as part of a real movement of over 40 state affiliates of Interfaith Power and Light that are engaging congregations around the country in responding, finding a religious response to the climate crisis.
I understand there's about 300 different various faith communities of the Interfaith Power and Light. And, you know, that's a tremendous number, but then you multiply that by 40 over different areas of the United States. That's a tremendous number, and I know you want to broaden that so you actually have thousands in each and even more of the Interfaith Power and Light. So how are you spreading the word and how are you recruiting and getting people involved?
Well, we found that even though congregations are so different, we have such different religious traditions and have different histories, actually a lot of what they come across when they think about going green is in common. A lot of people have food after services with paper or styrofoam cups and feel like that's not exactly the right way to be celebrating together in fellowship after worship. They're realizing that they use electricity, and that electricity is made by burning coal and other fossil fuels and is causing climate change, hurting our neighbors around the world. So despite the diversity and difference in the congregations that we work with, they find that a lot of the challenges they face when they think about taking our environmental problems seriously and responding with integrity really in common. They have a lot to learn from each other.
Well, Joel, the one thing about it is that even though we may be from different faith traditions and different orientation and all this, we're all on the same planet.
Right.
So, you know, whether, we have different faith traditions or not, the fact is that we have to coexist with all the other beings, human, animals, plants, and all that. And I think that's something that's very difficult because as the globe becomes so urbanized, we're 80% urban in the United States. You know, we think of the wide open areas and the cowboys and cows and all that. You know, we're urban people. And if you look at a country like Brazil, which you think of the Amazon jungle and all that, it's 87% urban. And so we're going to be well over 80%, even the African continent, by 2050. So how do we reach into these faith communities that's rapidly urbanizing and changing in every factor of their existence to say, time out, we need to think about the earth and make sure we're taking care of everybody around us, not just our own immediate family and community. How do we do that?
The thing we found is that almost every congregation has somebody who feels like the green sheep in their community, somebody who cares deeply about environmental issues and is starting to feel that there must be a religious, a faithful response to that problem, and feel a little bit lonely sometimes. They don't necessarily feel immediate support from their clergy person or from the other people in their community. And so through Interfaith Power and Light, we support those green sheep. First of all, we give them a place to flock together. They recognize each other across faith traditions, and they understand that that they share a common impulse to respond to this issue in a religious way. And we support them in doing three things simultaneously. We support them in doing environmental education in their congregations that's deeply rooted in their scripture, in their faith tradition.
Yeah, whatever that faith tradition is.
Whatever it is,
right.
That really digging deep and saying, what resources does my tradition bring to this new unprecedented problem that we face of climate change? And it support them in greening their facilities and really walking the talk in their congregations, thinking about how they use energy, putting up, we've seen rabbis climb up on ladders themselves to change light bulbs. I've watched a priest climb up on the roof to bless new solar panels with incense. Really making changes in the way their congregational buildings and their homes use electricity, create waste, really living out these teachings and these values with respect to the way they're operating their own communities and their own homes. And finally, we support religious communities in speaking out. In other words, in getting involved in environmental advocacy campaigns where they can make change together on a larger scale about how we're using energy and how we're creating climate pollution across our whole state, across our whole nation.
Yeah, looking at these faith communities, I know the focus as far as education is concerned, but also within whatever the tradition is the fact is that we need to allow the youth to be very much engaged and involved. So looking at these 300 plus communities of faith that you have, how are you engaging the youth so they feel like that they're part of it, that they're even part of the decision-making process and they're not just followers as far as that community of faith?
Just this evening, I came from speaking to a group from the Interfaith Youth for Climate Justice, which is a group of high school students of different faith traditions who are meeting for over a year-long program to think about how they can be climate justice leaders in their congregations. And they got it. It was such an inspiring thing to talk to them. One of the things I brought to their attention was our light switch reminders. We give out light switch reminders that have messages for many different faith traditions, making this connection between electricity use and where our energy is coming from and our faith traditions. So I have Christian, Jewish, and Muslim with me today. But the teens each took one home and we'll put them on their light switch. And I have a feeling that making that connection between their religious teachings and their electricity use will lead to a lot of good work.
Yeah, well, looking at that whole thing, actually, I have the one that I picked up from you a couple of months ago. We met with the Bethesda Green. I'm going to put a shout out for Bethesda Green. I think they're doing absolutely fantastic work, and that allowed us to have a chance to spend some time together and talk about what you're doing. But at the same time, you actually had a number of the people from the different faith traditions that were with you that night. So I noticed that not only are you out and about, but actually you're taking people from the various faith traditions. So how are you allowing them to be engaged with other communities? Like Bethesda Green is mostly for small to medium scale enterprises, and all of a sudden here you are right in the middle of it, and of course that's the way we're supposed to be. But how are you getting the congregations to go with you and feel comfortable in being part of the greater community?
Yeah, you met some of my favorite green sheep from Bethesda congregations that evening. That's a wonderful group. I think there are a variety of reasons why talking about these issues in religious communities is incredibly transformative, and it has to do with what you spoke about the role that religious voices can have in the larger community on environmental issues. The first reason that it's so powerful to do environmental education, environmental activism in congregations is that people listen differently in their congregations. The climate change issue has become extremely politicized, and too often when we try and talk about it in other settings, people hear it as a matter of political identity and not about a matter of right and wrong. But when they're hearing it in church, when they're sitting in folding chairs after services, listening to us talk about climate change and the way it's impacting people around the world, the kinds of suffering it's causing around the world, they hear it with their moral ears. They hear it as a matter of right and wrong. Yeah. And then when those green team leaders are transformed and empowered by that experience to speak out in the public square, speak out in Bethesda Green events, speak out in advocacy campaigns for environmental changes, they're heard differently because they are speaking in that spiritually rooted moral way.
Yeah, they're speaking in a morally rooted way, but at the same time they're trying to do things very practical. So this is an international television program, as you know. So how can people, regardless, South Africa, India, Russia, Denmark, Japan, how can they all become engaged in their own local communities that has very practical and almost nonsensical ways to get at climate change and enhance the future?
Well, one of Interfaith Power and Light's initiatives that anyone can participate in anywhere in the world is that the middle weekend of February 13th, 14th, and 15th, or 15th, 16th, and 17th, whenever they're in the middle there, that weekend, as is the national preach-in on climate change. It's an opportunity to raise up climate issues in our congregations, in our parishes, in our mosques that whole weekend. And if you go to preachin.org, you'll find sermon resources and educational resources that you could bring to any congregation anywhere in the world to start a conversation about climate change that weekend.
Yeah, that's very, very important. But we're looking at, okay, so we have this, but how do we carry this on so it's a 24/7, 365? So people really living not only their faith, but at the same time they're living the fact that we have to take care and actually improve the environment, not just take care of it in its current form.
Yeah. I've learned that it'd be nice if there was some way to skip the part where you have to really work with people on the ground in a grassroots way and just skip to the part where we have a worldwide religious movement for climate action, but there's really no way around it. I really believe in the value of the local groups like ours that are sitting with people in their congregations every weekend, talking with people about where our electricity comes from, at what cost, and what it might mean for them to live out their faith more fully with respect to that information.
Well, we have about 40 seconds left, so it's got to be quick.
Okay.
But what do you see for the next 5, 10, 15 years as we move towards 2050, and what kind of changes do we need to make? What changes are you already seeing?
What I'm seeing is lots of religious initiatives to take responsibility for environmental issues, becoming more aware of each other, and that we're seeing the emergence of a true religious environmental movement in this country and around the world, and that makes me very hopeful.
I think it's absolutely fantastic, and having you with us, Joelle, as I said, it took me about 4 years to finally locate you and have you come on with us. And I think it's important that, as the director of Interfaith Power and Light, throughout this region and the Washington, D.C. area, that we continue to reach out to the world, because this is really a world community, as you're well aware. And if we do that, then that's going to engage so many more people that are in the communities of faith. And we thank you, dear viewers, for being with us as we look around the globe to create the Emerald Planet, and at the same time to provide the hands and feet to make change. Thank you. Hello, dear viewers. I'm Dr. Sam Hancock, President and Executive Director of Emerald Planet and the Director and host of the Emerald Planet Inside Scoop television program, which we bring you each week. Emerald Planet is an international non-for-profit organization dedicated to identifying and sharing the 1,000 best practices in sustainable environmental and economic development across the globe. We are linking those who have successfully developed or discovered the latest advances to those in need. In spring 2014, Emerald Planet will begin its most ambitious project to date. Called the Emerald Trek, we will visit 144 countries over a 5-year period. Now, we need your help. As you may imagine, a historic journey of this depth and breadth is expensive. Please go to our website, www.emerald-planet.org, and press the donate button. That's www.emerald-planet.org and press the donate button. You can use your credit card or a check to support the Emerald Trek. All donations, large and small, will be most welcomed. Emerald Planet, and I thank you.
Without geography, our children aren't ready for the world. Geography is everywhere. It's incredible creatures, rhythm, fashion, flavor. It's economics and politics. It's change. Understanding connections between people and places is critical in the 21st century. That's why we created mywonderfulworld.org. Go there now for your free parent and teacher action kits and give our kids the power of global knowledge. Because kids who understand our world today can succeed in it tomorrow.
We're back to the Inside Scoop Emerald Planet. Here again, your host, Dr. Sam.
Hello and welcome to the Emerald Planet as we come to you from Washington, D.C. in the United States as we look around the globe in 144 different nations looking for those 1,000 best practices, the technologies, the services, and the products that are making a difference as we move through the 21st century. I'm Dr. Sam Hancock, the President and Executive Director of Emerald Planet and the Director and host for the Emerald Planet TV that we come to you each week with leaders as far as the world is concerned in all aspects of the environment and also to address the issues of severe climate change. And I have someone sitting beside me is doing absolutely fantastic work. This is Joelle Novey, who is a director of the Interfaith Power and Light in Maryland and Washington, D.C. area. And Joelle, welcome to the Emerald Planet.
Thank you for having me.
Well, tell us a little bit about what is Interfaith Power and Light. I love the name, and why does it exist?
Interfaith Power and Light is working here in the DC metro area and across the state of Maryland to engage over 300 congregations in saving energy, going green, and responding to climate change. And we're doing that work along as one of about 40 state affiliates of Interfaith Power and Light that are engaging congregations all over the country in expressing a religious response to the climate crisis.
Looking at the 40 different organizations, how are these actually created? And if I'm a congregation, a local community, and I'm saying, gee, I really like this name, Interfaith Power and Light, but I don't know how to engage my community of faith, how do they actually go about that? And I'm in Texas or Alaska or Hawaii or somewhere else.
There are great affiliates in Texas, Hawaii, and Alaska. You can look at interfaithpowerandlight.org with a and spelled out and look for your state and see if there's a group already. But if there's an interested group in your state, you can talk to National Interfaith Power and Light about starting a new affiliate. We'd love to grow the family.
Well, looking at that national affiliate, where is the headquarters for that? And then how do people engage? Let's say that I'm in a state where they don't currently or do not currently have one of those, and I want to be the champion within my own local community. How do I do that?
The headquarters is based in California and San Francisco, and you can find more about reaching them at interfaithpowerandlight.org.
Well, your organization communicates with a diverse group of worship and faith communities. And so what are some of the different congregations that you have involved with you? And how do you bring all these people together? Or is it a wide collaborative so they do what they want, when they want? How do you do all that?
Well, climate change, the blessing and the challenge of the climate change problem is that we're really not going to be able to solve it unless we all work together. It really calls our bluff as human beings and says, are those divisions or distinctions that seemed really important to you before the era of climate change really that important now that we kind of have a challenge that's threatening all of humanity? And so that's why we find climate action to be such a powerful basis for interfaith work, because there's really it really calls our bluff and says, maybe these distinctions and differences between our faith traditions that felt really important in the past, maybe they're not that important, and really our common values and our common concerns are more important and a strong basis for cooperation.
Yeah, going back to something you and I have talked about earlier, is the fact is that regardless of the faith tradition, is that we're all citizens of the world, and the challenge is growing on a day-to-day basis, particularly as we add 2 billion new souls to the planet. So we're looking at all these new people. We're looking at the rapidly urbanization of that. So how do you engage and then allow the feedback? And so this is really the new twist of this. Allow the feedback into Interfaith Power and Light so that there's an ever-expanding dialogue about climate, about the environment, about how we're going to progress as we go through this 21st century.
We sit with folks on folding chairs in church basements or the basement of their congregation, and we ask, let's become aware of the electricity in this room. How is that electricity made? And they first look around and notice the lights and notice the exit sign and notice the heating and cooling and notice the projectors and things plugged in. And then we tell the story of that electricity and how it was made. And we tell about burning coal and burning fossil fuels, burning natural gas to make that electricity. And we talk about the impact that that's having around the world, particularly the way it's putting heat trapping climate pollution into our atmosphere, causing our Earth to warm. And we look at a couple graphs. People let me show them a couple graphs in church. And the graphs show that we have warmed our climate 1.4 degrees Fahrenheit over the last 150 years, and that the rate at which our climate is warming is getting faster and faster. In other words, that line is
accelerating all the
steeper.
time, yes.
And then I ask them to remind me some of the things they've heard would happen if we don't do anything about this. And most of the people in the room can usually name many of the consequences, both the suffering of human beings around the world now and in the future, losses of species, many disruption to our weather, disruption to our agriculture. And then we ask, well, now how do you think about that light on in this room, now that you've thought about the global and irrevocable consequences of burning fossil fuels and heating our climate? What should you do? What do you think you should do as a community based on your community's values, now that you're understanding this connection? And they figure out what they need to do. Well,
looking at of course, this is a global phenomena, and so we're sitting in, Earthen Hut in Papua New Guinea. 85% of the people that actually are not anywhere on the grid, near the grid, have even, in many cases, even seen the grid, or you're in a country like Bangladesh, where out of the 150 million, plus or minus 50 million of these people are projected to be displaced by 2050, because there's, one half of their nation may be under 3 foot of water with, the ocean rise. So how do we translate this from a community, a society, very modern, like North America, most of Europe, some places in Asia, a few countries in South America, to a country that really majority of the people are not even on the grid or have access to that light that we're flipping on and off, and have it translate to them as how they become engaged, and not just saying, you're the ones that created it, you figure it out. How do we do that?
I mean, it's one of the tremendous injustices of the way climate change is playing out around the world, that those who are suffering first and most are among those who are the least responsible for the pollution that's causing this warming. And people in congregations that I work with, their hearts are really touched when they focus on that reality. I tell them a story about Bill McKibben, a climate writer who was in Dhaka, Bangladesh during an outbreak of dengue fever. The mosquitoes are thriving at the new warmer temperatures with climate change. And he walked through a hospital with people shivering away in all these beds, and he said, those of us in this country produce 25% of the world's carbon pollution, so if there are 100 beds in that hospital, 25 of them are on us. He's like, the epidemiology isn't perfect, but the moral math works for me. That's not a message I've heard outside of the faith community in this country. This idea that we have a personal, a national responsibility for the suffering being caused by our climate pollution, that is an idea that the faith community is bringing to the conversation.
Yeah, and it's just like with the spread of malaria, the mosquitoes are going higher and higher in the climate, no matter where you are in the world, whether it's in South America or Asia and places like that. And West Nile disease is expanding. It's expanded with less than 3 years across the continent of the United States, as another example. So as we move forward in the 21st century, many of these very viral diseases are expanding at a rapid rate because of climate change. So translating that, Joelle, and what you're doing through the faith community, how do we say, not just the United States, but it's on all of us as members of a faith community?
I think one of the things I found that's important to acknowledge, people do come to their congregations to grieve and celebrate, to think about the consequences of their behavior, and to follow that where it leads, follow what they where that learning leads. But I found that it's very important to acknowledge that people have feelings when they talk about climate change. It's very upsetting to really think about it. It's very upsetting to think about the tremendous injustice of the way it's playing out. And I think the more we can use our conversation in congregations to give some space for those feelings of grief, those feelings of anger, the better people can open to the next question of what are we going to do about it. I've learned that climate change challenges people's theologies, and I mean the way we all have a theology, a belief about the way the universe works and what our role in it is. To think that we no longer can count on the seasons to be the way they were our whole lives, or in the past or in the future, that the world our children live in may be so different from what we knew, that all of our scriptures, like the story of Noah and the ark, kind of assumes that only God can mess with the weather, and here we have evidence that in fact we are messing with the weather. I think that's really unnerving and unmooring to people, and I think the more we can support them through that disorienting response, the more they can join with others and take action.
I have two quick questions. We only have about 2 minutes, so it's going to be quick for each of these. There are still just a few, but very few in the science community, but even elected officials are deniers of climate change. How do we deal with that within the faith community?
I remember that the great majority of Americans, studies have shown, are actually not deniers and are not dismissive. They're curious, they're open, they're listening. They would like to understand whether climate change is something they need to worry about. So first of all, I remember that I'm not meeting too many of those people when I'm speaking to them. I actually think the biggest threat climate deniers pose to the rest of us is that they can waste our time. We need to be out there being climate activists, and if I'm getting stuck arguing with some person about whether the science is real or not, they're wasting my time that I could be spending fighting climate change. So I try to say, what I've learned was really convincing and conclusive to me. I've decided we need to take action, but I invite you to look more into the science and come to your own conclusions.
Well, I think that's a very, very good answer, and we have about 30 seconds left. So Interfaith Power and Light, where you see it over the next 5, 10, 15 years as we move towards 2050?
I'd like to see the religious environmental movement being a vocal, critical participant in all of our good work around the country and around the world to respond to climate change.
I think it's absolutely fantastic, and that's actually a good summary, and we're just about running out of time. So we have Joelle Novey, who is the Director of Interfaith Power and Light in Maryland and Washington, D.C. area. Thank you for being with us, and being over 300 or being with 300 different congregations, and I know you want to expand that. That's a tremendous leadership role that you have, and we think it's absolutely fantastic. And hopefully the people who are watching this program, whether they're here or abroad, actually take this to heart and incorporate this into their own community of faith. Thank you for being with us as we look around the globe and as we